to give you some information about Donau Soja organization. And I try to share my screen. Okay. So Donau Soja, as some of you might know, is a truly European organization, a multi-stakeholder organization that has more than 320 members in 25 countries. We have regional offices in some of the major soy growing areas in Europe, like in Serbia, Novi Sad, Kiev in Ukraine, Chisinau, Bucharest and Amsterdam, also representations. We are a non-profit organization recognized as such by the Austrian government, and we're also supported by 24 governments. This means that 24 governments have been supporting and signing our Donau Soja Europe Soya declarations. And we are operating in all sectors of the value chain and also discussing with civil society organizations and NGOs. On the next slide, you can see some nice overview about the 320 members that we have in the 25 countries from sectors along the whole value chain. Our vision as Donau Soja is a sustainable, safe and European protein supply. And our mission is to support our members and partners in tackling the related challenges. Donau Soja is basically active on 3 different levels in all those areas mentioned here. So we are active on the political lobby level, at European level. That means we have been initiating Donau Soja Europe Soja declarations, but also European protein strategy. The second area of activity is market work. So we are providing a quality scheme and product label. Standards are published on our homepage. Consumer products with the respective label are available. And we have also started to develop the protein partnership program to be able to invest in the first step of building up the sustainable physical supply chains. And the third and last topic that I would like to mention is that we are also active in the research and innovation area, but that's not the focus of our presentation today. So, having given you a short overview about Donau Soja organization, I would like to start with an overview about soy cultivation in Europe and an outlook regarding the harvest 2023. So, as you can see here, on the left slide, that's the acreage of soy cultivation in Europe. It's 1.1 million hectares. And on the right side, you can see also the development over the years. On the right side, you can see the acreage in whole Europe. So it's more than 5 million hectares. And acreage, as you can see, especially also in the EU, has doubled in the last 10 years, but there is still a big potential to increase, as actually soya is really growing very well in Europe. We have actually one of the best yields worldwide in European countries like Italy. The second slide, here you can see the output, the forecast for the output of the soy cultivation in Europe this year. And you can see on the left side with respect to EU. So we are expecting actually an all-time high in terms of soy output. We're expecting 3 million tons produced only in the EU. But probably more interesting and relevant for the whole continent is the output in Europe, geographically speaking. So here we have an increase of 16% this year, and we are heading to the 11.5 million tons. So where does the increase come from? In the EU27, there is an increase of 750,000 tons. And as you can see below in the slide, the majority is coming from Italy and Romania, Croatia, and the countries that are listed here. And talking about Europe geographically, the main increase is in Ukraine with a 678,000 tons increase. Here we would like to give you information how you can regularly receive such kind of informations, because we are publishing a monthly soya market report where we give information about the soya market with a special focus on the non-GM sector. We give information about price development, non-GM premiums, and of course, always a forecast for the cultivation and the harvesting season. And what's also really interesting for many of our partners, of course, is the daily price development. Here we do have a cooperation with the German Proteinmarkt.de, and we are publishing daily price notations on our website together with Proteinmarkt.de. To give you also some sort of information about Donau Soja organization and our standard and the availability of certified volumes, because that's of course also part of the webinar today. We do have around 1 million tons of certified soybeans in Europe according to Donau Soja standard, which is of course sustainable, non-GM, deforestation and conversion-free soy with a cutoff date of 2008. And we've involved almost 10,000 farmers. Beans are in 200 collectors, 950 certified partners. So this is just to give an idea that there is quite a significant availability of certified beans in Europe, basically something like 10% of the non-GM soy production in Europe. If you take Ukraine, we are having almost 20% of Ukrainian soy production under Donau Soja Europe Soy certification. And one of the issues that is, of course, very much interesting for our partners and for market is always the price. And here, especially the premium for the non-GM soy. And this is just to give you an idea that, of course, the premiums were extremely high when COVID started. And there was a second real peak when the war against Ukraine started. But nowadays, since quite a while, premium are really down. And yeah, here you can see the development. The next two slides, this is just if you want to have a more closer look after the webinar, the development of the soy price and the premium for the different products like high prod, low prod meal in the different geographies. And last but not least, I would like to show you this slide for all those participants today that don't know Donau Soja so well. So we are really internationally recognized standard by all these initiatives and organizations that you can find here. But my colleague Chris will go into detail here later on.
Yes, thank you, Susanna. I hope everyone can see me. If not, if you can hear me, it's Christoph Müller, and I just wanted to say that we received a couple of questions beforehand already, and we wanted to answer one now. That was about the development of the non-GM market and market demand.
Yeah, thank you, Christoph. So a question we would like to address right now is about the market development, more specifically about the non-GM market development. Thank you, AXA Real and Hansel Connect for putting this question. So of course, it's a bit hard to say how it will develop in the future. The non-GM market is focusing obviously on the DACH region like Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and on the plant-based food sector, because here a GM label would be necessary. It is very clear that consumers do not want it. But markets in Italy and France, for example, are not developing so nicely. We also have to mention, and basically there is a lot of discussion and insecurity in the market right now because of the NGTs, like the new genomic technologies, and that's why we need to see how things are developing, but availability looks quite good. And as we just saw before, prices are also developing quite nicely.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to remind you, if you have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and then we will answer them. Because we have so many today, I think it's easier this way. If there are no more questions to the topic right now, or maybe we do have some on LinkedIn, just checking with my colleague here. Otherwise, I would say
Christoph, we have one more question. It's about how is it with the Donau Soja feeding on average to laying hens on the certified farms? And I think here we could say that it differs from region to region. But for example, in Austria, farmers are usually using 10% of soy in their feed recipes. But in other regions, we also can see a trend to use less soy, like average of 5%. So that's another question, but I suggest that we continue with the presentations now. And I would like to invite you, Chris, to start with your presentation about EUDR and beyond, and give us some insights also how Donau Soja can help here. What does it mean beyond? And especially also, of course, our pilot projects.
Yes, again, also a warm welcome from my side. I'm really happy that so many are in this webinar today. And yeah, just looking at the time, I would say let's dive into the topic, the EU deforestation regulation, but also important topics and regulations beyond the EUDR. And first, let's start, where does it come from? Of course, there's an environmental background. We all know that the global climate crisis and deforestation are two of the most pressing issues we have to face at the moment. Agriculture and forestry account for about 23% of global greenhouse gas emissions, and deforestation alone is responsible for more than 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And when we look at our EU supply chains, soya accounts for more than 30% of the deforestation that is linked to the supply chains into the European Union. So these are just some facts as background and that highlight the importance of deforestation-free soy and sustainable supply chains in general. But also there's a legislative background of the EUDR, and this all basically started with the Green Deal, with the big goal of being climate neutral by 2050. To achieve this goal, it needs a lot of different pieces because it's basically a complete transformation of our economy and society that includes everything from the food system to energy to mobility, and of course, protect and restore our nature. And as part of this goal, the European Commission is working on a biodiversity strategy, and part of this biodiversity strategy is the deforestation regulation. So just that you know the context of the Green Deal. And also on the right-hand side, you can see the topic of global climate action, because the deforestation regulation is not just for inside the European Union, but also outside of the European Union. So it's for production, but also for imports here. But what is it about? The EUDR basically says that from the end of 2024, companies that place soy on the EU market must prove that it was produced deforestation-free with 2020 cutoff date, which means that deforestation in 2019 is still okay, but deforestation in 2021 is not okay anymore. And also that it was produced in accordance with the relevant legislation of the country of production. This must be demonstrated before the soy is placed on the EU market with a so-called due diligence statement. And how this process looks is what we will see in the next couple of slides. The thought behind the EUDR is to be able to prove deforestation-free and legal production, we need to know exactly where it's coming from, and therefore traceability to the plot is required. Which means another requirement of the EUDR is that we need the geolocation data of all plots of land where the commodity was produced. And the commodities that are actually covered by the EUDR is timber and paper products, cocoa, coffee, palm oil, rubber. And the exception here is the cattle, because it's the only animal that is covered, and of course, soy. But what does soy mean here? Therefore, we have to look in the annex of the regulation, where it is defined that soy means soybeans, soybean flour and meal, soybean oil and its fractions, and also oil cake and other solid residues. So if you want to know if the product that you're dealing with falls under the regulation or not, you have to look at the tariff numbers. If it falls under the tariff numbers that are shown in the annex of the regulation, it does fall under the regulation. And if not, it does not fall under the regulation. And who is responsible for that? It's always the company placing the relevant commodity on the EU market or export it from the market. And looking at these tariff numbers, there are some interesting examples about the due diligence. For example, compound feed does not fall under the EUDR because it has a separate tariff number. The due diligence for soy as animal feeds end with the animal farmer once their soya is consumed, because then, for example, it's traded as pork meat, which has a separate tariff number. Again, the exception here is cattle, because cattle itself falls under the EUDR. And from a retailer perspective, it means that retailers, for example, do not have to prove the origin of the animal feed for the chicken or for the pork they sell. Okay, and what do we have to do to be compliant with the regulation? Therefore, the due diligence process is described in Article 8 of the regulation, and it always consists of these steps. First, you have to gather information. And this is always required because this is what you need for the further steps. If parts or the whole commodity is from standard or high risk origins, you have to do a risk assessment. And if you find a non-negligible risk, you have to introduce risk mitigation measures. If in the first step you find that everything is from low risk origins, you can directly go to the due diligence statement. This is the so-called simplified due diligence process. Also, the due diligence statement is always required, no matter if it's from low or high risk origins, and it must be uploaded in a new information system that is currently developed by the European Commission before the product is placed on the EU market. So only after having done the due diligence steps, it is allowed to be placed on the EU market or exported from it. And now we will look at the information requirements and due diligence statement, because these are the steps that are always required. Like I said, no matter if they're produced inside the European Union or outside the European Union, and no matter if it was from low standard or high risk countries, this information must always be gathered and stored for 5 years. Let's start with the easy ones. You need to know your own company address and economic operators registration and identification, or short EUDR number. And usually companies who trade these goods, they have a EUDR number anyway. It's kind of a customs number. And also this must be included in the due diligence statement. What you also need to know is from which company did you buy it and to which company did you sell it. And this is usually known already anyway because of current regulations we have here. But now let's look at the soy-related requirements that are much more interesting here. You need to know the trade name and quantity. So for example, let's say we want to export 1,000 kilograms of soybeans. Then you need to know the harmonized system code. And therefore, we again look into the annex of the regulation and see soybeans have a tariff number or system code 1201. So we include 1201 in our due diligence statement. You need to know the country of production. In this example, I used Serbia as an example. And the geolocation of all plots of land where the relevant commodities were produced. For this example, I have included one geolocation data point from Google Maps. So this is quite easy to copy from Google Maps, but you need, or one geolocation point is only enough if the field is smaller than 4 hectares. If the field is bigger than 4 hectares, you need basically one geolocation data point for each corner so that you receive polygon data that you can include in the due diligence statement. And therefore, usually farmers have a couple of fields, and therefore the list of geolocation data points can get quite long, quite easy. Just imagine at the next level of the supply chain, which is usually the first collector, who receives soy from dozens or maybe hundreds of farmers. Each farmer has dozens or hundreds of data points for geolocation data. So on the first step, you have probably thousands of geodata points already. What you also need is the date or time range of production. And here I have chosen a harvest date of last week because in Europe, we are in the harvesting season for soy already. And then you need information that the product was produced deforestation free. Here, various approaches are being developed at the moment already, often with remote sensing or satellite images. and often in combination with some kind of registration by the government. The European Commission originally wanted to give guidelines for what is accepted as proof, how must it be done, etc. But they are doing it not. And therefore, it now lies in the responsibility of the national competent authorities. And this means every European Union member state has to define a competent national authority for the implementation and verification of the EUDR. And each national authority can decide what they accept as proof and what they do not accept as proof. This means there can be differences in what is accepted between Spain and Austria, for example. But of course, the goal is that they all accept the same thing, and there are structures in place that they talk to each other about, or like align their acceptance documents, etc. The same is true for the point of legal compliance in the country of production. And this question mark is even bigger than the one before, that it's still not clear what exactly is accepted as proof of legal compliance. However, when we look how Donau Soja can help here, basically with every point, we have the information that is needed. Our soy is deforestation and conversion free, and legal compliance is also part of our standard. And this is why our EUDR pilot projects start with the current harvest already, because we have deforestation and conversion free soy with a cutoff date of 2008, which goes far beyond the EUDR. So that means we can check this point. Also, compliance with national legislation is part of our standard, so we can check this point. And the really big new thing of this legislation, the traceability to the plot, is available for 2/3 of the certified Donau Soja volumes already. So we can check this. And new is that we have the geolocation of the field plots included in the traceability certificates that we have already automatically in a digital way. Yes, and this is our pilot projects for 2023 already. But now let's look into the shortcomings of the EUDR. So what is missing as part of the regulation? It's limited to deforestation only. So that means other sustainability issues like pesticides, fertilizer, non-GM crop rotation, etc. are all not included. And the really big miss here is that it's not conversion free. For example, when we look at Brazil, most land conversion for soy production is happening in the Cerrado region, which is the most biodiverse savanna in the world. But because of that, most parts of it do not fall under the definition of a forest and therefore are not covered by the EUDR, meaning the EUDR will not have a positive influence on landscapes like this. Also, the EUDR has a very late cutoff date with 2020, which might undermine standards and initiatives with a stricter and earlier cutoff date. It also means that there is no new deforestation in our supply chains, but all deforestation until recently and all linked carbon emissions are still part of our EU supply chains. So in summary, we can say that the EUDR does not help to reduce carbon footprints in our supply chains and also does not protect any other sensitive areas. But how does this connect to the big Green Deal goal of climate neutrality by 2050? Well, it doesn't. But there are other regulations coming that are exactly going in this direction. The reporting and reduction of carbon footprint of companies and products. And it also shows that certification beyond the EUDR is still very, very important. So let's look into the carbon reporting and reduction topic. And starting with our Donau Soja data, because we have done the life cycle assessment showing that compared to the standard Brazilian soy, Europe soy and Donau Soja certified soy has a up to 90% smaller carbon footprint. And even if we compare it to the standard European soy mix, there is still a 50% reduction in the carbon footprint. And this data is available as branded data sets in the AgriFootprint and GFLI databases, where users of Donau Soja can use this data to calculate your own carbon footprints and also to show carbon footprint reductions in your supply chain. And how does Donau Soja come into play into all this, what's coming? So first, let's look what is there or what is coming. There are a couple of voluntary carbon reporting and reduction schemes, with the science-based targets probably being the most important at the moment, with 6,000 companies globally are committed as part of the science-based target to reduce their carbon footprint, including their supply chains. And the science-based target has a special flag area. This stands for forest, land use, and agriculture. And includes especially food processing and production sectors. And these sectors must implement no deforestation and no conversion targets by the end of this year. Then there are mandatory carbon reporting and reduction regulations, like the CSRD, the Corporate Social Reporting Directive, or EU Sustainability Reporting on environmental, social, and governance topics. Therefore, the European Commission has published a standard how to report it. It's called European Sustainability Reporting Standard. And the first chapter of this standard is about carbon emissions and climate change. And this is mandatory for all companies that fall under the CSRD. That means that companies have to assess how they influence climate change with carbon emissions, but also how climate change affects the companies also in a financial way. And this is one of the new things here, that you have this so-called double materiality assessment, and that it's also on one level with the financial reporting, in contrast to the current non-financial reporting directive, which is replaced by the CSRD. But although it's called reporting directive, it's not just about reporting. It's also about actually reducing carbon carbon footprints in the supply chain. So carbon reduction measures also need to be reported. And then there's the EU Supply Chain Act coming. It's called, or CSDDD, Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive is the full name of it. And this means that companies must protect human rights in their supply chains, but also the environment. And the environment part here also includes an alignment with the 1.5 degree target of the Paris Climate Agreement, which again means reducing the carbon footprint of the company, including the supply chain. So both of these regulations require companies to reduce their carbon footprint, including the supply chain, and no offsetting is allowed here. That basically means you really have to reduce the carbon footprint of your in your company. So you have to implement measures and not just buy carbon credits, for example. However, we have learned that the EUDR does not help to calculate or reduce a carbon footprint, but Donau Soja does. We have done the life cycles assessment that show a significant carbon reduction, up to 90% on beans level and up to 40% for animal products. Also, our data is, like mentioned before, in the databases of AgriFootprint and GFLI, which helps you to calculate and to reduce your carbon footprint for all these initiatives and regulations here. Okay, let's end this part of the presentation with the multiple benefits of Donau Soja and Europe Soja. The topic carbon reduction that I just mentioned is the first one, but also we have the traceability certificates already. And with the harvest 2023, we will have the traceability certificates, including geolocation data in a digital way. Especially in Austria and Germany, there are several sectoral agreements on GM-free animal feed. And also in Germany, there are commitments to higher animal welfare that include GM-free animal feed. And also here, Donau Soja and Europe Soja help for these commitments because they are GM-free. Then this is the big miss of the EUDR, that it's not conversion-free, in contrast to Europe Soja and Donau Soja, because they are conversion-free with 2008 as cutoff date. And most European retailers have no conversion commitments for soy supply chains, which cannot be achieved with the EUDR. Looking at the German market again, there is this quality and safety standard focused on animal products, and it covers about 90% of the German meat market. And they implement a new module on certified conversion-free animal feed from January 2024 on. Here, Donau Soja and Europe Soja are accepted as conversion-free standards that help to achieve this commitment. And it's also interesting for the Austrian market because QS in Germany and AMA in Austria have a mutual recognition agreement. So that means these new requirements for the German market will also influence the Austrian market. And then there's this big topic of biodiversity that is gaining more and more recognition in initiatives, and also is as part of the CSRD, because the CSRD also has a chapter on biodiversity protection. And there are new initiatives coming, like the Science-Based Target for Nature, that have the goal of protecting biodiversity. Here, topics like less pesticide and fertilizer use or best practice water management are important, that are part of our standards. So that means with all the requirements you see here, with everything that is coming for the European soy supply chains, Donau Soja and Europe Soja really can help you to fulfill these requirements. And yes, this was the last slide of my presentation. I'm happy to answer some questions.
Thank you, Christoph. Maybe you can stop sharing your screen. We've got 3 questions meanwhile. One is about the RED certification. And if RED certification is automatically includes deforestation free.
Yeah, so as part of the EUDR, there is no green lane for certification. That means just because something is certified doesn't mean that it's compliant with the EUDR, and this is also true for RED cert standards. However, certification can, of course, help to gather all the information that is needed for the information requirements and also for the due diligence statement.
Okay, thank you. So there is another question about the risk assessment. Which are the criteria for EU origin risk assessment?
Yeah, the whole process of the risk assessment is described in Article 10. And there is no difference between EU and non-EU countries. However, there is this country benchmarking that is currently being developed by the European Commission, where basically every country gets a risk, either low, standard, or high. And then the differences in the risk assessment basically lies on if it's a low risk or standard risk or high risk country or origin.
Thank you. Then we have another question that is actually in the chat, but we got it already beforehand as well. It's about the tariff numbers. Do you have any view on when or if additional tariff numbers will be added to the Annex 1? If more tariff numbers are added, do you have any insights on what type of notice might be provided to companies potentially in scope? So we got this question 2 times.
Mm-hmm. So what is planned at the moment is that in 2025, the European Commission will assess the effectivity of the EUDR and is supposed to basically expand the scope to other woodland and other natural ecosystem, but also to new tariff numbers, for example, to include maize.
Thanks. Then there is 2 more questions that I would like to take here before we continue with the third presentation. One is regarding EUDR. How do you document that farmers are compliant with the local legislation? Well, actually, I would say that is covered by our certification, because there has to be compliance with EU legislation and obviously also with the local legislation. And that is part of the certification process and of the audits, and is covered and certified by third-party certification, external certification bodies that are doing that certification. And then there was another question. You mentioned that Donau Soja can be used to reduce footprint. Chris, maybe you can share one more time the slide with the CO2 emissions, so the Blanc and so on. So we did commission several consultancies. One of them was Blanc, to do the CO2 calculation for soybeans. Specifically for European countries, and they have been doing the calculation. They are published now, and the result is that it's minus 90% in comparison to average Brazilian soybeans, non-certified. And then we did additional calculations also on the product level, because that is of course very interesting for our partners. And in those studies, we could find that, for example, for 1 kilo pork, there is a reduction of 40% per kilo pork if you're changing from average soy that is used in German or Austrian soy production to Donau Soja. But you will be able to read all this data also in the slides that we can provide after the webinar. And of course, you can find a lot more information about this topic also on our homepage. Okay, then I would suggest that we go to the next presentation. We will have time to answer the other questions at the very end, but we would like to give also a fair chance to our third speaker to do his presentation. So Steffen Kemper, please start your presentation. And I would like to ask you to start also with some introductory words about your person and Global Nature Fund. Thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. I hope you can see my screen now, the first slide of my presentation. And of course, I will tell you who I am and the organization I'm working for. So my first slide, I think already, there are already some informations on it. So my name is Steffen Kemper, and I want to present the deforestation strategy checker Elan, the main output of our so-named project to you today. And I'm working for the Global Nature Fund. And together with our project partner Oro Verde, we have this Elan project. It stands for, in German, Entwaldungsfreie Lieferketten, aktiv für mehr Nachhaltigkeit. So that means deforestation-free supply chains, actively for more sustainability in your supply chains. The Global Nature Fund was founded in spring 1998 as an international foundation for environment and nature. Our headquarters is in Radolfzell, but we have further offices in Bonn and Berlin, and I'm located at the office in Bonn. And we are working basically in 4 areas of activity. First of all, the nature and our environmental protection. Then we have the living lakes and water department. We have sustainable development and development cooperation projects. And there is the 4th unit is the unit of business and biodiversity. And I'm working in this unit of business and biodiversity at the office in Bonn. So that means we are working on projects in most of the cases together with companies to enhance biodiversity in their production, in their supply chains, in their processing, and so on. And also do some consulting on this topic. So now to our Elan project. Yes, the title I already mentioned. The project runs at least until May 2024. We are not working alone on this project, but together with our project partner, Oro Verde, the Tropical Forest Foundation. The project sponsor is the Federal Ministry of Economics and Climate Protection in Germany within the National Climate Protection Initiative. And in our Elan project, we advise companies, especially in Germany, especially small and medium-sized enterprises, on the topic of deforestation-free supply chains, and of course also on the EUDR. Thank you, Chris, at this point for this good presentation and this good overview on this regulation. So recently, we have published the beta version of our so-called Elan portal, this deforestation strategy checker. It's an information online platform, especially for companies. And this is, you can say, the main output in our project. Yeah, and I want to briefly present the portal to you now. Starting out with this slide, before we step into the portal, then I show you a little bit what you can find there. So our portal has the aim to guide companies step by step through the process of supply chain transformation into deforestation-free supply chains. You can reach the portal. It's, I have to say, only available in German language so far. You can reach it with this URL here. And we divided the information presented in this portal in 3 steps. So you will find the commodity-specific information, also specific information for if you are a soybean importer or trader, for example. Recommendations for action, guidelines, tools, so a lot of information divided in these 3 steps, starting out with the strategy development. So before taking actions, before measuring your impact or your deforestation risks, you really have to think about the EUDR, this new regulation. What does that mean to me? So we provide understandable information on the new regulation. We also have a big chapter about definitions. Then there are some general advices on strategy and responsibility in your company. And also on the topic of climate protection. We also heard about the importance of this topic in Christoph's presentation. And there are huge amounts of CO2 greenhouse gas emitted through deforestation. So a big topic here. Then if you have done this step, you can take the next step and do some risk analysis and measures. So here you will find information that can support you in this process. For example, information on raw materials and risk regions. Some tools are presented here you can use for getting a better picture of the deforestation risk in your supply chains. And of course, there are also some informations on certifications, like Donau Soja, for example, and some multi-stakeholder initiatives which might help you in this process. And of course, you have to do some monitoring and reporting on this topic. I won't go into further detail here, but I want to step into the portal now. So I hope this works out. Okay, let me try one more time. Yes, this works, I think so. Slow WLAN here in Bonn. Sorry for that. So here you can see the starting page of the Elan Elan portal. So as I already told you, we have divided this portal into 3 steps. You can see them here once again: strategy development, risk analysis, and monitoring. As you can see, our portal does not only deal with soya, but with all risk commodities affected by the EUDR. You can find them here. And on this first page, you will find an explanation how the portal works. So a description of these 3 steps, and then here's some details for the portal usage. And then you can start with this button here. And this leads you to the first page. And there's also an EUDR subpage where you will find all the relevant information about the regulation in a very compact and understandable way. That's here. And each of these 3 subpages, in each of these steps, you will find a questionnaire, a checklist, this one. And this allows you to get a better understanding of where your company stands. What are you already know? What are you? What measures do you already undertake? So this is a self-check for you as a company, and will also show you the gaps where you have to put some work in. And then our portal helps you in this stepwise approach to do this. So on all pages, you will also find short recommendations and useful links, and we have icons for that. So for example, here, this is the recommendation button, and this one is the useful link button. You will also find some fact sheets as a PDF documents to download. For example, this climate protection fact sheet we developed. By clicking on this picture, you will download the PDF content, and you will find downloadable contents on all 3 steps. Yeah, let me see. I think yeah, maybe this is also interesting. You have the checklist at the top, and you have this conclusion at the bottom of the page, where you can find a status quo. So there you can find information what you as a company should have achieved working through these information on this first page, and then going further to the next step. And this is the principle of our portal. I think I don't have the time to go here into much detail, but yeah, I would recommend you to check this out on your own. It's totally free to use. We hope that the information might help you dealing with the topic of deforestation in your supply chains or applying the new EUDR. So I wish you a little bit fun and success with it. But let me step into my presentation for one last time. I brought you also some general business recommendations, so to say, for takeaway. The most important recommendation I can give you, because of talks we have to other companies during our project, is to start early with the preparation. So first of all, or for you participants here now, and you are maybe Donau Soja certified, I think it's a good recommendation to talk to your standard setting organization, of course, what they can do for you when it comes to the fulfillment of the EUDR requirements, or the, for example, geolocation data you will have to publish. And get involved in maybe commodity-specific industry initiatives and working groups. I think there's a lot going on. There will be new initiatives and working groups coming on. Talk directly to your suppliers. One of the best hints I can give you, because maybe you need some of the information you need for the EUDR from them. And trace your supply chains back to origin, evaluate the deforestation within your supply chains, and of course follow the actual regulatory processes on the European Union level, and the development of support offerings like our Elan portal, but also other tools and portals, information systems, etc., because these are developments that might help you. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Steffen. Probably we should mention, apologies that the Elan tool, of course, is a German language, but we still invited Steffen to present this tool because many questions that are reaching us are from German-speaking areas, and the presentation as such was in English. But yeah, apologies that the tool itself is in German language. So
maybe I can add here that we are, in case we will be able to continue with our project in the next years, then I think there will be an English translation of it.
Yeah,
so that's
super.
something for the future, but yes.
That's what I had already in my mind, but I was a bit ahead of the time. Yeah, so let's go into the chat and the questions. So there were some questions related to the footprint, CO2 footprint. I think they have been mostly clarified, but just to be clear, the most important single factor is, of course, always the land use change. And that makes the big difference between Brazilian non-certified soy and European soy, and even bigger difference with a certified European soy. But I would like to mention that there's also other factors involved, like good agricultural practices, as my colleague wrote in the chat, because Donau soya beans are also way better than average European beans. And this is, of course, because of cultivation practices and the early cutoff date that we do have at Donau soya. And I would also like to pick out one more question that is about, I think, the EUDR and the due diligence statement. So to summarize, the obligation for the due diligence statement is at the first, as the one that is first putting on the market, placing on the market. And as the question is not so clear to me, if you're already inside the EU, so if you're, for example, a farmer in Austria, then the first point is the primary collector, and then the primary collector has to fill the due diligence statement and get a number, and this number has to be forwarded in the whole value chain. So I think we are basically done with the questions. And as I do not see more questions, I would like to use the last minute of this webinar to thank you very much for your participation and for your interest. We will share the presentation with you afterwards. And we would be really happy if you can give us a sort of a short feedback. So we'll be happy if you send a short comment in the chat if you thought that the webinar was interesting for you or not so interesting, and if you would be interested in any further information or webinars in the future. So I have a final look in the chat. Yeah, Chris, please.
Yeah, so as a summary, I just want to mention, we know that compliance with the EUDR is now the overarching topic everywhere. And for many companies, it's very hard. And we know that there are still many open questions, but also from an environmental perspective, but also from a legal perspective, not just look at compliance with the EUDR. There are initiatives like the SBTI, but there will also be more regulations as part of the Green Deal. So look at the supply chain and try to make it sustainable and not just deforestation free, because there's a really big difference. And also it will help you in the carbon footprint reporting and reduction that is coming. So just see it as a chance to really make the soy supply chain sustainable.
We cannot hear you, Susanne.
Oh, thank you, Dagmar. I was just saying, Chris, this was a really nice closing statement. And with this, I would like to say goodbye to everybody and wish you a nice rest of the day. Goodbye.